Welcome to my PowerPoint about poker hands in Balatro. Of course, we're going to start with high card. High card does kind of have the least amount of things that actually synergize it directly, but it's still a pretty good hand to play. It is 5 chips and 1 molt and gains 10 chips and 1 molt every time you put a level in it with Pluto or other sources. High card builds typically want to be playing, well, 1 card at a time. And if you're only playing 1 card at a time, you might be thinking, hey, how can I really score with this? The answer is you have a lot of molt and times molt or chips from your jokers, or you have a lot of in-hand effects that go off. You can have Baron and King. That's a really popular high card build. You can have, Baron Kings with Mimes. You could have Queens in your hand with Shoot the Moon. There's a lot of different things. Steel cards, and having a full hand of steel cards can be really useful. High card builds are actually pretty much don't need to use discards at all. So if you have like Delayed Gratification or Green Joker or Ramen or something like that, jokers that don't want you to discard, then there's no real downside to them whatsoever. Same with like Burglar, because you're just playing 1 card, and the card you're playing typically doesn't matter unless, you're looking for a specific enhancement. But if you've built your deck correctly, you're going to be having a lot of enhancements, a lot of steel, a lot of anything to be hitting pretty consistently. As well as the fact that high card builds can still cycle relatively decently just by using their hand. You just play, say you have, 9, 2, 6, 7, 4 in your hand, right? As long as it's not a flush, you're just playing it out. Everything but everything that isn't the 9 won't score, so you're still playing a high card while still cycling 5 cards out of your hand. High card is definitely very interesting, and as a poker hand, it's very fun to play, and I do get why people like it so much. Now we get to ones that actually have a lot of jokers. Pairs. So pairs are, of course, Mercury. They give 10 chips and 2 molt, and they gain 15 chips and 1 molt per Mercury. Pair is an awkward hand, I feel like. It scales poorly. It doesn't have as many cards in hand as high card. It's not as easy to make as high card, and the jokers are pretty poor, right? Like Sly Joker is pretty bad. The duo only gives ×2 molt for hitting a pair. The main power of pair is actually the fact that it works inside of full house, 3 of a kind, flushes, or 4 of a kind, 5 of a kind, flush house, flush 5, etc., right? It works in all these multi-card hands. While pair hands themselves aren't amazing, right? They still do synergize with just better poker hands. That being said, you can still play pairs about the same way you play high card, but because you do have 2 cards in hand, well, it can matter what you're playing a little more. If you're playing, say, I don't even know. So you're playing 2s, right? And you want to play for your Wii Joker. Well, that's better than playing a high card for your Wii Joker. If you're playing 2s, you're probably playing a lot better than a pair build, but there is that. Pairs don't need as much deck fixing to make work. They typically just want more enhanced cards rather than deck fixing, and they still do synergize incredibly well with steel cards. I'm not the biggest pair fan in the world. I do think that pairs are probably my least played poker hand overall in Balatro. But they do have their uses, and if you do get a pair build going, it can be really fun. It is fun to play 2 cards. I don't know what it is. Something about playing pairs is just actually really fun, and I get why people like playing 2 pair, because you get to do it twice. Speaking of 2 pair, wow. 2 pair, it gives 20 chips and 2 molt. Uranus is the card, of course, and it gains +20, +1. So it actually scales pretty poorly for a 4-card hand, but that's just it. It's the easiest way to create 4 cards in your hand. So if you're trying to play a lot of cards out, 2 pair can actually do a lot of work. 2 pair is very similar to how I described pair, in the sense that it works as, every 2 pair card works with full house, and full house is actually a very strong poker hand to make use out of. 2 pair is definitely weird because, like I'm saying, it scales pretty poorly. It isn't that good at a base. It's not even very easy to make because, hey, you still do need 4 cards. But in the sense that 2 pair is pretty good to use as a transition piece, similar to pair, it can actually do a lot of work. Transitioning out of 2 pair and, say, you know, spare trousers can actually let you set up for some pretty, like, significant things. There is... The way that Balatro works as well, though, is that if you're playing a poker hand that is better, or considered better, even if you have less levels in it, then another hand, it will play the higher pure poker hand. So, you can actually play 2 pairs in a flush build, which is kind of funny. I do have to admit, though, that I'm not the biggest fan of 2 pair. Like I said, pair and 2 pair, I feel like are my least played poker hands altogether. So there could be some things that I'm missing on this. You know, people didn't like my take on spare trousers, which is funny. But I think that I still do believe that 2 pair is overly difficult for how pretty poorly it scores. And again, the amount of jokers that it has, like, it's just spare trousers, not really much goes else with it. 3 of a kind is also, like, it still falls into this kind of, like, category of pair, 2 pair, 3 of a kind, that it will hit a lot of different poker hands that are way better in using the jokers that you do get from it. Venus is the planet for 3 of a kind, of course. It gives 30 chips and 3 molt, and gains 20 chips and 2 molt per level. 3 of a kind is the easiest way to play, like, multiple of the same card in a hand, and arguably, I'm gonna say it, it's better than 4 of a kind. Now, I know 4 of a kind, of course, gives way more scoring than 3 of a kind does, but you have to consider the fact that 4 of a kind is harder to hit than 3 of a kind. However, if you've built your deck to try and play 4 of a kind, well, why not play 5 of a kind, right? So it's kind of in this dichotomy of 3 of a kind is just way easier to hit than 4 of a kind, and, you know, 5 of a kind is way stronger than 4 of a kind if you're already hitting a 4 of a kind. Yeah. I can't talk. Of course, full houses do scale off of any 3 of a kind jokers you have. 3 of a kind, like, it's a very powerful transition hand, in my opinion. If you pick up these 3 of a kind jokers, you pick up some Venuses, right? You're playing towards 3 of a kind, you're building your deck towards this 3 of a kind, you have a lot of options. You can transition into full house, or, you know, 5 of a kind, flush house, flush 5, etc. in a not too difficult manner. It's a lot easier to transition into those than, say, you know, a straight build, but it's definitely interesting. I can't talk. So the reason that 3 of a kind gets a lot of value, in my opinion, is the fact that there are so many jokers that score based on certain played cards, right? So if you are playing, like, say, I mean, Wii Joker's a great example. I talked about 2s before. I actually wrote it down. Wii Joker, you know, if you have a lot of 2s, you can start playing 3 of a kind to scale up your Wii Joker, and that's pretty decent. Of course, like, I mean, if you are building your deck in the sense to play towards 3 of a kind, eventually it will just be better to play 5 of a kind, and 5 of a kind, you know, scales significantly better than 3 of a kind, so there is something you have to watch out for, but I don't think 3 of a kind has any problems. I think that it's a simple hand to make, it's really not that difficult, and it transitions into so many different, like, better poker hands that it really is a solid way to play throughout your game. Straights are my goat. I love straights. Saturn is, of course, the planet card for straights, and straights start at 30 chips times 4 molt and give plus 30 plus 3 per level. There's a lot of straight jokers. They have the most amount of jokers that you can always access. I have to say this in quotes because flushes technically have the most, but you can't always access all the flush jokers. But there's a lot of powerful straight jokers. Runner, the order, Four Fingers, Shortcut. There's a lot of really powerful utility jokers that go along straights, and I already made a whole video on it, so I won't get too in-depth towards straights, but they let you play 5 cards, which this is the first 5-card hand that we've talked about. 5 cards matters a lot, right? There's a lot of re-trigger effects that can love 5 cards. Enhanced cards love having 5 of them in it. Any on-scoring effects. Plus, I mean, straights scale pretty well. This is a continuation because there's so many jokers. Straights scale the second best, or like they're tied for second best scaling of any of the non-secret poker hands with 4 of a kind. That's kind of like insane. On top of the fact that it is a well, 5-card hand. Straights, I always say this, I don't think straights are as hard to like deck fix towards as a lot of people say. The easiest way to do it, of course, is to trim the edges where you get everything above a 10 and everything below a 5. You just get rid of it, right? So 10 through 5, you can hit straights very consistently. From that, you'll remove, I think it was 32 cards from your... That doesn't sound right, does it? 4 times 4, 16. Yeah, 32 cards get removed from your deck. Because you're also getting rid of aces, I guess. But it can be a challenge. It definitely can be to hit them in lower antes, right, where you're not having a lot of deck fixing, and it's not the easiest, but they give a lot of score. You get 5 cards. They'll give a lot of chips, so having flat molt is pretty good with it. Straights are just all around a very solid hand and a big fan favorite for a lot of people. Flush. Oh boy, Flush is a hand of all time. So Flush gives 35 chips and 4 molt, and then gains plus 15 chips and 2 molt. Flush is the easiest way to play 5 cards, period. I mean, of course, there's 4 suits, and if you play, you know, spades, diamonds, clubs, or hearts, you can make a flush. That's part of the reason that Jupiter actually scales relatively poorly compared to other 5-card hands, right? It only gives 15 plus 2. Every other 5-card hand gives way more than that, like every single other one. So to make up for that, flushes aren't that hard to make. There are a billion flush jokers, so I definitely can't show them all on here because there's just so many, but they definitely allow you to hit a lot of different cards and do a lot of different things that you kind of couldn't do otherwise. Say, for example, you want to play, well, a hack build or a sock and buskin build or kind of anything, right? You have, and I put the example down here. If you have 2 5s, 1 3, 1 2, and 1 4, that wouldn't make a hand, right? It's just one off from being a straight. But if they're all the same suit, you can actually play it out and gain value from your flut or from your hack or any other joker that does that. There are, of course, you know, jokers like Gluttonous or Bloodstone, right, that are specific to whatever suit you're playing. And there's really, really powerful jokers like Ancient Joker that, you know, gives times 1.5 molt when you play the specified suit. So there's a lot of just really powerful ways to make flushes, and there's a lot of really powerful utility cards for flushes. Smear Joker, as one of my examples, makes it so that hearts and diamonds count as the same suit, and then clubs and spades count as the same suit. So it makes it so, hey, your basic deck actually only has 2 suits in it rather than 4, making flushes significantly easier to get. Do note, though, that, I mean, flushes, they are fine. They can definitely win you the game, but due to the fact that Jupiter scales quite poorly, sometimes you can just lose because you're not getting enough levels in your poker hand, or not getting enough scoring from your poker hand. So you do have to watch out for that. Bloodstone and Ancient Joker, they're really powerful jokers, but again, Jupiter doesn't scale that well, and these jokers get all of their scoring based off of your poker hand. So you do have to be careful when you are playing towards these, that you desperately need to get as many levels in your poker hand as possible, where you kind of wouldn't need that many levels in some of your other poker hands. Full House. Full House is a funny hand. It is 40 chips and 4 molt, and then gains 25 chips and 2 molt when you level it up. Full House doesn't have any jokers that directly synergize with it. However, like I've been saying throughout the video, you know, pair, 2 pair, or not, sorry, 2 pair actually does work with Full House, sorry. Pair, 2 pair, 3 of a kind all work with Full House, and yeah, that means that there's so many ways you transition into Full House that it really does become a good poker hand. It already gives a good amount. It scales relatively well. It scales better than your flush does, and it's still a 5-card hand, which does everything that every other 5-card hand can do. I think that Full House, like, I think the fact that it's so flexible makes it go into its own kind of niche space compared to other, like, poker hands. And if you, like I'm saying, if you do pick up these jokers that do synergize with it, right? Your 2 pair, your pair, your 3 of a kind, you can kind of get a lot out of it. Do note, though, that, like, while you can get 5 cards with a Full House, it's not the easiest. I'd say it's still harder to get a 5 or a Full House than a straight, in my opinion, which is part of the reason that it does give more score than a straight, but it doesn't scale as well as straights do. So do be careful, again, in the same vein as I was talking about flushes, do be careful if you're picking up jokers that are better when you have higher levels in your poker hand, as, well, Earth, it doesn't give as much scaling as some of the other ones, right? So you do have to be careful there. 4 of a kind it's a hand of all time. Of course, you have Mars, which gives you every level, but it's 60 chips times 7 mole at base, which is very high, and then it gains 30 chips and 3 mole per level, which is pretty good. It's tied for the second highest with straights. However, gosh, the only like Joker that directly synergizes with playing 4 cards is Square Joker, which is not that great of a Joker, I do have to say. And of course, the Tribe, which gives times for Molt, the Tribe, Trio, Duo, anything below. And that's like the power of 4 of a kind, is it does similar work to Flush House in the sense that, Flush House, Full House, in the sense that any lower tier like poker hand Joker does work with it. However, if you're playing a deck that goes for 4 of a kind, why not just go for 5 of a kind? 5 of a kind scales better. If you are deck fixing to get 4 of a kind, you're gonna be able to play 5 of a kind anyway, and 5 of a kind or 5 card hands are just better to play than 4 card hands. 4 of a kind's in this weird spot where 3 of a kind is easier to make, and that makes it better than 4 of a kind, and 5 of a kind is arguably the same difficulty to make once you've done a little bit of deck fixing, and just scales way better. This might be a controversial take, but I do think 4 of a kind is probably the worst poker hand. I think every other poker hand has better use cases, are easier to make, scale better, etc. than 4 of a kind. And like this could be my hottest take of the whole video. I really do think that 4 of a kind is just one of the worst poker hands. I don't know what needs to be done to fix it. Definitely add more Jokers that specify playing 4 cards. That would help it a lot, and 2 pair actually. So there is that, but I don't know. And the last of the regular hands is Straight Flush. Straight Flush gives 100 chips and 8 molt and gains 40 chips and 4 molt per level. This is tied for the best scaling poker hand with some of the secret hands. I'll get to that in a minute. And I mean, I have to say something. I think Straight Flushes are one of the best hands. Now, you would think, right, okay, well, it's got all the it combines every, Joker that works with straights and every Joker that works with flushes, right? So that's pretty good there. But it goes even further in the sense that there are Jokers that, like, make straight flushes actually very easy to hit. Shortcut, Four Fingers, and Smear Joker actually make straight flushes significantly easier to hit, and due to the fact that straight flushes scale so well, using like 2 or 3 Joker slots just to hit straight flushes isn't that big of a deal, right? You just get a billion levels in your poker hand, which you should be doing anyway, right? But you don't need as much like flat mole or as many chips from your Jokers, so you really can afford to give up a couple Joker slots just to utility. And that's fun. I'm not gonna lie, that's actually really fun to have more slots open to utility rather than scoring. Like obviously, right, straight flushes do give like a lot of chips. They give a lot of scoring, right? It's base 800 and gets increased like by 160 every. That's probably not even true. That math doesn't check out. But they're just, I don't know. There's something about them. They don't feel as hard to create as like for how much it gives you. I think that really is mainly due to the amount of utility Jokers though, because well, say, 4 of a kind, 5 of a kind doesn't really have a utility Joker in the same way that, Straight Flush does, and they're still very powerful scoring hands. So we get to the secret hands. The secret hands don't have any Jokers that directly synergize with them. I mean, obviously, right? They're only unlockable after you play them for the first time. 5 of a kind is Planet X, which is 120 chips and 12 molt, and then it gains 35 chips and 3 molt per level. Flush House gives 140 chips with 14 molt and gains plus 40 plus 4. And lastly is Flush 5, which gives 160 chips and 100 times 16 molt and gains plus 50 plus 3. That actually means that Flush House and Straight Flush are the best scaling poker hands in the game, right? Eris, actually scales slightly worse than Ceres, but there's that. I like playing with these hands. They're really rewarding when you do pick them up. They do take a while to get going because, well, you're never playing these until like the late game. It's just not really possible to play until like mid to late game. So they do take a while to get going, right? But if you have your Space Joker, if you have your telescope, you have your blue seals, you can definitely get these to go off. And that's fun. I do have to admit. Now, it has to be said, I have to say this. I've talked about it so many times. I still think that 5 of a kind is just directly better than 4 of a kind. And like, deck fixing be damned, you can, guys, it's really not that hard to get 5 of a kind if you're going into an endless run, or if you're even like have like pretty good deck fixing jokers, right? Like trading cards, or you're hitting a lot of tarot cards to hit deaths and like fools and stuff like that. You can hit 5 of a kinds in your average 8 ante game, but I do have to note that like hitting the flush house and the flush 5, you probably aren't going to be doing that in a regular 8 ante game, especially in Gold Stake. It's probably not going to happen. Can it happen? Most definitely, right? It can definitely happen, but it's not going to be very easy if it does happen, and you're probably like omega high rolling to get to that point. Now, last but very certainly not least, there are a couple miscellaneous jokers that do interact with your individual poker hand itself, rather than like, say, they interact with straights or flushes or high card, right? We start with Card Sharp. Card Sharp gives ×3 molt if you've played your poker hand already this round. I mean, I've said it before, I think Card Sharp is pretty decent if you're playing like high card or I guess even pair builds, right? Because it's not hard to make those hands and you're just getting a ×3 molt joker for pretty free. So it does gain a lot of value there, but there are times, I mean, Card Sharp isn't that great with a lot of like higher, like more specific poker hands, right? It's pretty bad with straights. It's not the greatest with flushes. But if you are playing like, I guess, 5 of a kind, flush 5, where your entire deck is 1 card, then actually Card Sharp kind of goes crazy again. It has like a lull in like what poker hands it can use, where it's really good with low, like poker hands that are only playing 1 or 2 cards, or poker hands that you're playing all the same card and your deck is built towards it. Obelisk gains 0.2x molt whenever you play a poker hand that isn't your most played. I know that people don't like Obelisk. It is awkward to use sometimes, and like, if you don't know how to use it, it can just be useless. Obelisk is a transitional joker, right? Say you've played like 100 like pairs, right? And then you pick up Obelisk and you're like, dude, now I just play literally anything else, and Obelisk is giving me scaling X molt that kind of goes crazy. One of the best ways that I've found of using Obelisk is like, I'll play a lot of high cards, and then I'll transition into like a pair or 3 of a kind build. They're not the hardest to make, and like, what happens is you have high card that doesn't really score ever. You can play like you play like 20 or 30 of them, right? And then as long as you're like not transitioning, as long as you're swapping between like a couple different hands, like flush, pair, 3 of a kind, 2 pair, etc., you won't really ever pass that like 20 played poker hand mark. So Obelisk will pretty much get to the point of like 4, 5, 6, sometimes even 10x molt if you played in like, if you play it enough, and that's awesome. Obelisk is one of the hardest jokers in the whole game to use. It's very skill testy, and I don't know, I like it a lot. Supernova gives +1 molt for each time you've played your poker hand. This is like, okay, it's not the greatest, it's fine. It takes 15 hands to hit like 15 molt, and they all have to be the same hand, so it can be pretty slow. Your best bet is probably playing high card or pair with it, right? Because you can hit those pretty consistently, and then, well, it gives like an okay amount of flat molt. So if you get like a lot of chips or you get some times molt, it can do some decent stuff there. It's definitely not the best joker. It's a pretty mediocre one, but knowing how to use it is definitely important. Burnt Joker upgrades your discarded poker hand. So if you discard an entire straight, which, I mean, damn, dude, then it'll upgrade straights. Again, most of the time you're going to be discarding high card or pair, or maybe even like 2 pair or 3 of a kind. Some of these like easier to create poker hands. You can do flushes. That's not the hardest in the world. So yeah, I mean, Burnt Joker is very strong, right? Do not get me wrong, but it is a rare joker. You're probably not getting it that consistently, and a lot of the times when it shows up in your run, you're probably getting it pretty late. However, again, if you are playing towards like these high card or pair builds, it can be so valuable because those builds, I mean, they're not really scoring based on playing a lot of cards, right? Enhanced cards don't really matter. On trigger effect card like jokers don't really matter, right? So getting a lot of levels in them really can help with to increase like your flat molt from your jokers and your times molt jokers to get a lot more value. Space Joker, I mean, it kind of does the same thing as Burnt Joker, just it's a 1 in 4 chance to upgrade played poker hand. This is still very good with like high card and pair, but it does do a lot better with your more difficult poker hands to create, right? Because, well, it doesn't really for Burnt Joker, it's only your first one. I forgot, I didn't write that down and I misspoke. It's only your first discarded hand. That's why Space Joker is different, because Space Joker works on every played hand. So if you're playing a lot of high cards, it can work on every single one. If you're playing 5 of a kind, it can level up your 5 of a kind. If you're just playing a 2 pair just because you need to get the cards out of your hand, hey, it will level up that 2 pair sometimes and get you a little extra score. Space Joker does work amazingly with Oops All Sixes, and I don't know, I like Space Joker. It's really fun to play with, and getting levels in poker hand from this rather than like planets is free, but it is, you know, only a 1 in 4 chance, so you do have to be careful not to rely on it too much. Then last, but very certainly not least, is To-Do List. To-Do List gives $4 if you play the displayed poker hand. That's it. That's actually not that hard. If you see high card on it, it's super easy to generate money out of. Yeah, there is the chance that it will go to like say full house or 4 of a kind. That's not easy. It won't ever go to a secret hand unless you've played it already, I believe. So you don't have to worry about that. But I mean, sometimes To-Do List gives you straight flush and you can't ever possibly hit a straight flush. Sometimes it gives you high card and then you get $4 per hand, and that's awesome. It's definitely a powerful Joker. It's just a little RNG reliant, but hey man, it's a card game. RNG is the name of the game. But yeah, that's giving it for me. If you enjoyed, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. I think poker hands are, I'm gonna say it, I think it's easily one of, if not the best balanced and well-designed parts of Balatro. There are many different ways to work with poker hands. There's many jokers that specify poker hands, and they're cool. Poker hands do let you experiment a little bit with different, you know, like X number jokers, right? Like if you're playing Wii Joker, you know, 5 of a kind can be really funny there. Or if you're playing Hack, you know, flush bills can be really work well with Hack, right? So poker hands really do push the game, I think is what I'm trying to say. And I mean, hey, it's based on real poker, so poker hands are of course very important. I know there's a lot of people that have played Balatro that have never actually played real poker, but if you haven't played real poker, that's really funny. I know for us, because we've played, you know, hours and hours and hours of Balatro, right? We're like, oh, I can pick whatever poker hand I kind of looking for. But if you've played real poker, you just get screwed a lot of the time. You're going to see high cards and pairs way more consistently than you're seeing, you know, your straights, your flushes, etc., right? So be careful for that, but I don't know, man. I like poker hands. I think it's a really fun mechanic, and I think Local Funk has balanced it pretty well. I like the fact that flush scales worse, even though it's the easiest 5-card hand to make. I like that. I think it's funny that 4 of a kind is just kind of worse than both 3 of a kind and 5 of a kind in 2 different ways, right? I think it's just really funny. Anyway, that's gonna be it for me. Like I said, if you enjoyed, like, comment, subscribe, tell me anything down below. What's your favorite poker hand? I've said it before, I think my favorite poker hand is probably straights. My socials are there on screen or they're down in the description. Make sure to join my Discord. I love talking about Balatro there. People just talk about it all the time. If you are interested in like a community to talk about, or if you're interested in Rivals and Hearthstone, people are still very active about those in there. Anyway, that's gonna be it for me. I'll see you guys next time. Peace out.